So the last kind of Seattle area related stories I wanted to talk about is in December there was a gathering in Dallas, Texas, or several gatherings, I guess, for the return of JFK Jr. And you might be like, how is that related to Washington? But the people who were there are associated with kind of like this cult, like post QAnon cult type thing, and the leader of that group is a guy named Michael Protzman. And he lives in Federal Way. So, do you have much experience going or any associations with Federal Way?
I like driven through a few times, but yeah, not much beyond that.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time in Federal Way because I grew up in Auburn, so that kind of like South King County with like Auburn, Federal Way, they're all kind of together. So I've spent a lot of time in Federal Way. It is a very kind of bizarre town in the sense that it only became incorporated in like the 90s, and it's
Oh
just
wow.
kind of, yeah, it's just kind of like developed in unincorporated King County. So it's just like a lot of houses and strip malls off of the freeway, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess driving through, I grew up in Orange County in Southern California, and I got kind of a similar vibe from it, where it's sort of this like enclave that's away from the main city, tends to be much more like right wing, and yeah, it literally is just cul-de-sac strip malls, two-story houses.
Yeah, but the one good thing I will say about Federal Way is there is like a big Asian population there, especially Vietnamese. There's a lot of good Vietnamese restaurants, stuff like that.
And is there like ongoing like out of discrimination or anything?
Um, Potential. Well, I mean, maybe a little bit, but nothing that's like too remarked upon, I guess. Another association with Federal Way is that is where Gary Ridgeway, the Green River Killer, lived, at least for part of the time he was killing, but I think pretty much the whole time.
Wow, pretty wild. Who's that other serial killer who's like from the area? I mean, there's a few, I guess. There's that one guy who like worked as like a process server. God, why am I blanking on the name right now? Oh no, Ted Bundy.
Well, yeah, Ted Bundy
Yeah.
was from here, did some of his crimes here. I believe about 7 total.
Yeah, I have a friend who, I, if I'm recalling this correctly, like worked at the company that I mean, obviously years in the past that Ted Bundy had worked at as a process server.
Oh, was Ted Bundy who you were thinking of?
I think so.
Yeah, but anyway, okay, so about this cult, it's called the Negative 48 cult, and it involves some type of numerology. Like that's a big focus of this cult, where it's like 48 is evil, an evil number, so they're negative 48. Do you know what the 48
Fascinating.
means?
Um, I like, first guess is like, what is this like the contiguous 48 states, or is there some connection to like 1488? But no,
No, yeah, I forget what it is exactly, but it's like, oh, like deep state, the numbers of the letters add up to this, and then so they're the opposite. It's not deep
okay.
state, it's probably like Lucifer equals 48 and they're negative 48. I don't know though.
Yeah, it's not so, yeah, about like the gematria. There's some significance there or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So they included some quotes from what this leader was ranting about at the rally in Dallas. So he said, quote, "Yes, I am QAnon King 174. Yes, I am coming home 174. Yes, John Kennedy 174. Yes, I am Jesus Christ 174. Yes, John Kennedy 174." Um, So
Oh, that's him.
that
Okay.
yeah, that seems kind of like the next level of the just like untethered schizophrenic rantings of QAnon. Like this is like even beyond that kind of.
Yeah, where it's like they're talking about the symbolism that is like supposedly right in our faces, but then when you like look at it, it's like this is just meaningless. Like you're just
Mm-hmm.
stringing numbers together. But it's funny it's 174 because the phone area code in Orange County is 714. But
Oh,
yeah, I don't know what the significance of 174 is. I guess other than what it adds up to.
now you're thinking like a
Yeah.
gematria user. But yeah, and so this article also goes into basically it seems like this guy did have some sort of psychological break. We only get like a police report from 2019, so maybe he was just like a terrible asshole and conspiracist before that. But on 2019, his wife filed for divorce, and they got into a big fight where he was holding her down and was saying if he couldn't have her, no one could. Very cliche statement.
Yeah, pretty like a textbook abusive behavior.
Yeah, no kidding. And he was like restraining her from leaving, basically forcing her to agree to marriage counseling, ostensibly to save their marriage instead of leaving it. The police described him as in a blind rage, and she fled the house barefoot to the neighbors and called 911. And so the statement she said to the police or the dispatchers or whatever, yeah, the police in a statement, kind of highlights how he got here. She said, quote, "For the past 2 weeks, Michael has been acting differently, not showering or working, and believing in government conspiracies." So it kind of seems like believing in this type of thing and having seeing things in a very schizophrenic way. I don't mean that disparagingly, but the whole like, yes, I am Jesus Christ, yes, I am QAnon, like that is kind of how I describe it. Is tied into his divorce and abuse of his wife.
Yeah, it's really you can go chicken or egg with it. Like somehow I think one will kind of end up with the other. With when you have people in this kind of desperate situation, they may already have some kind of propensity for like mental illness. Combined with, I guess, the ultimate kind of I don't know letdown of the QAnon movement and people believing that something still has to happen. So you have people who are kind of on like the margins like this, and then they'll think that it is now on them to make something happen.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how kind of in the post QAnon world, they really have broken up into these like kind of like cultic formations where like some people really believe this dude is was QAnon, or he is some type of, has some type of metaphysical touch. And there are other figures who kind of command a cult like group like this. Like I know there's a guy online named Juan O'Sabin or some weird screen name like that. That other people also believe he is QAnon. And then there's also like some people who have just been seen at QAnon rallies, and there's like been like several photos of them, and people are convinced like, oh, that is QAnon or that's JFK Jr. Did you foresee this as the fate of like the QAnon beliefs post Trump?
I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I guess January 6th was in a way kind of the like predictable culmination of that. In some ways, it's maybe good that it has kind of devolved and like fractured like this. it would have been kind of crazy for QAnon to continue like as it was during the Trump admin. But I guess also, I don't know, I wouldn't have been super surprised if people did continue with this, like, patriots are actually secretly in control. And it wasn't that actually, that was the thing people were saying for a while, where like Biden is actually like a secret white hat and like working with Trump to like take down the cabal or something.
Yeah, I think some people did believe that.
But yeah, for it to just now be this kind of series of like disconnected, like miniature figureheads of the movement, I guess it makes sense, because when that energy runs out and they no longer have their guy in charge, and he's off Twitter, and they're not getting like their dispatches from him anymore, those people are going to turn to someone who is presenting themselves as like an authority.
Yeah, I guess this kind of raises well, I guess one thing I'll add on that is that, I mean, I'm assuming that if Trump is going to run again, he probably will, and I'm assuming that he'll all of a sudden on somewhere online, probably on Trump's new social media site, it's like QAnon will be like, "Hey guys, I'm back. Remember me?" Like, I do think that it started as as some sort of operation and then maybe became something else, but I think they're like, wow, that was a real successful operation, maybe we shouldn't have abandoned that.
Yeah, they just reboot it.
Do you think that's gonna happen?
Yeah, that's super. I think if he inevitably will run, I have some level of fear that he may win, but yeah, whether it's Council for National Policy or some other like weirdo Peter Thiel adjacent group that is like behind it, I feel like there's definitely room for them to come back and reboot. That is funny because you mentioned that whatever the origins were, on 4chan, as like I don't know if you ever went on 4chan like back in the day.
Yes,
before
absolutely.
It was, I guess, quite as kind of like Nazi shit coded. Although, I mean, looking back, probably not a lot of great stuff was on there at the time either.
No.
But B was like funny. I would hang out on B and laugh at stuff, and then see other stuff and be like, "Yeah, that's terrible. What am I doing on this website?" But there were those people who would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a FBI anon, and I'm like working to take down the government, et cetera, et cetera." And it was like all these kind of disparate threads that eventually culminated into what became QAnon. So those are just almost like, I don't know, the alpha tests of it or something.
Yeah, which is kind of weird because it's like the type of typical 4chan user, maybe at first was hyping up QAnon, but I think a lot of them were just kind of like, yeah, we've seen this before, because they have seen that before many times, like people claiming to be some like obscure insider. And so it's crazy that it managed to catch on with an audience that doesn't really typically use 4chan or did not before that.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know if it was just a matter of it spilling over onto Facebook, or Trump just kind of giving it enough juice that there were enough, like, quote-unquote normies who were, like, pilled by it, that led us to where we are now. But almost the absence of anything like that right now, I'm finding, like, I don't know, it's too quiet,
Yeah, and so I guess I think about it like, this -48 group definitely seems like a cult, but that kind of begs the question, like, what is a cult? Because the way people talk about them or define them are always different, and I try to use it in a value neutral way, even though it has such negative connotations, where like, cults in ancient Greece or Rome or anywhere in the ancient world were more like localized religions. They might take like an element of the pantheon and be like, we only worship this god, or like just very like localized to the specific interests of a group. And I think this absolutely like fits the very like ancient notion of a cult even more than something like Heaven's Gate or like Jonestown or something like that does.
Yeah, very much. When it comes down to it, a cult is, I don't know, it's like a group of people who are like super enthused about some specific idea. And I mean, you could kind of almost apply that analysis to like any level of society. Like, in some regard, like our entire country is a cult built around, generating value and burning oil and drone striking weddings in Pakistan. And then down to, a company now, maybe even more than, or I don't know, more than in a while. A lot of companies have kind of like, they almost cultivate a cult-like atmosphere. I used to work at the Apple store, and I mean that's like famously kind of a odd like cult environment, and that at least from what I've heard, corporate is like somewhat even more than that. But yeah, the way any organization kind of tries to like dictate their own values and what their core purpose is. In some sense, that would be by definition a cult. Although, also, side note there, for this article from the Dallas Morning News one, the Mike Rothschild guy. I do appreciate the work he does and the reporting. I don't know how many people who are already like extremely skeptical of like mainstream media. A guy with the last name Rothschild. I don't know how much that's gonna like help the cause.
Yeah,
I think he is literally a Rothschild, I believe.
No, I listened to a podcast where he was interviewed, and he said that he has no relation to the Rothschilds, but at the same time, like that literally doesn't matter to anyone who would believe in this.
Yeah, if you're that like kind of red pilled, you'd be like, well, that's what you would say, but you're actually, due to some ancient bloodline, you are actually a Rothschild.
Yeah, they'd be like, well, I don't know if this guy is Jewish, but they would say, well, you're still Jewish, so you whether you're a Rothschild or not, like, you're still basically a Rothschild. Like,
that's close enough for those people.
Yeah, I don't know if he's Jewish though, but like I think they would accuse him of being Jewish, because that's kind of maybe not this group specifically, but that is what the far right does to just dismiss anyone a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I guess it is what's kind of interesting with like QAnon and adjacent stuff is maybe some more overt anti-Semitism. I feel like you don't see as much, but it's still very much there, kind of in the more diehards of the movement, even if they won't like admit to it.
A lot of it is like would seem inadvertent to the leaders, but like it means something else. Or I mean, it would seem inadvertent to the people who follow it, but to the more like intelligentsia of this, they'd be like, yes, we understand what this is coded as.
Exactly, yeah.